Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and in today's review, we are going to take a look at the Singxer SU-6 USB audio bridge, or also known as a digital-to-digital converter, or DDC. This is a $750 product. I actually bought this unit from Apos Audio. Apos was generous enough to give me a slight reviewer discount. Not a huge one that's going to be life-changing, so don't worry about it. But I did end up paying the bulk of the MSRP for this unit here, and it's time to give it a review. So that I can keep buying things like this for the channel and to bring you cool content, the link that you will see down below for this product will be an affiliate link. So if you like what I have to say about this and you are in the market for a DDC, please consider using my affiliate link down in the description below to buy this product, or I will also put an affiliate link in the description for its little sibling, the SU-2. Okay, also from Apos. I'm going to do a comparison of these two units here in this review, but in either case, using that affiliate link will help me get a few bucks back and help me keep this channel going and keep this running. But outside of that small discount, Apos has made no attempt to influence my opinion on this piece or any other, so all thoughts that you are about to hear are mine and mine alone. So with that long list of disclaimers out of the way, let's go ahead and do shameless self-promotion, and then we will dive into the review of the SU-6.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
To help set up and frame this review a little bit more, I'm going to remind a lot of you, or maybe tell some of you for the first time, that for a very long time I used the Singxer SU-2 DDC in my system, connected between either my computer via USB or various streamers that have USB output. And primarily my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, because that unit does not have a USB input on it. So to connect it to the computer or various streamers that have USB output, like a Sonore ultraRendu or something like that, I needed something to convert a USB signal to other forms of digital audio output. Okay, so that is what a USB audio bridge like these products do. They take a USB digital audio signal and they convert it to other types of digital audio output, like SPDIF, either coaxial or toslink, or BNC, or AES EBU, the balanced flavor of SPDIF, or they will convert it to an I2S output, which can use an HDMI connector. All right, so I had been using the SU-2 for a long time, and I will put a link to that review down in the description below. I chose to try the SU-6 for a couple of reasons. One, I've been reviewing a lot of DACs lately, and trying to compare DACs can be very difficult because they don't always have all of the digital outputs you need that are identical enough that you can connect to different DACs and do quick switching and all of that, and just, you know, keep them on the desk and do comparison work. So I needed more outputs, honestly, and the SU-6 has more outputs. And the overall quality of my system is climbing to a level where it's like, you know what, maybe the big brother model in Singxer's line of DDCs would make an audible improvement. So those are really the two reasons that I tried this one out. I asked Apos if we could work out a deal. They said okay. And again, I don't want it to sound like I'm hiding anything, but it was still going to cost me close to 600 bucks, even with their discount, to get this in here. But I did it for you, honestly, okay? Maybe a little bit for me, but a lot for you, because again, I've been doing a lot of DAC reviews lately, and I needed more digital outputs from a quality source that I can trust to do comparison work. So that's why the SU-6 is here, and when it got here and I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, this thing needs to stay, okay? And so we are going to unpack all of that in the course of this review as we progress. So, real quick, I have mentioned this in previous DDC reviews. Okay, I've reviewed the SU-2, link in the description. I've also reviewed the Denafrips Iris, okay, link in the description for that as well. And in those two videos, I talked briefly about why you would consider buying a DDC, why you would consider buying a product like this. And there's something like 2 to 3, 2.5-ish reasons. I think 2 of the reasons are kind of closely related to each other. One reason that you would get such a product, okay, is that either your DAC lacks a USB input or its USB input is not very good. It doesn't have galvanic isolation or something like that. It's just not of great quality. Okay, so you can stick a device like this or the SU-2 or the Iris. There's several options out there these days in between a USB output and the SPDIF or I2S input, whatever your DAC is using. Okay, to either create that USB connection or improve on a not great one. So that's like reason numbers 1 and 1.5, so to speak. The other big reason is what I just described earlier, is you might run a multiple DAC setup and you want to connect your USB source to more than one DAC. Okay, you're not crazy if you do that, because DACs do sound differently. DACs do match to amplifiers differently, and some of us have multiple signal chains. I have multiple signal chains for reviewing work so that I can try different combinations of things at different price points and all of that to try to get a good idea of where any given piece falls in the market. But also, I mean, in this hobby, we are just a little bit crazy, right? And so some of us have multiple signal chains that we might want to source from a single streamer, for example. So getting a device like this that has multiple outputs that you can use simultaneously can be a big help in situations like that. So there you go. The 2.5 big reasons to buy a DDC. So with that said, let us talk about this DDC, the Singxer SU-6. All right, so features of the SU-6, real quick. It's got some impressive innards, and of course my tablet closed, so here it is. Okay, so what we have inside of here is an XMOS X-Core 200 USB controller, and that is connected with a Xilinx, I think that's how you say that, PGA chip. And then we have a thermostat level clock system and Cristex 2 CCHD 957 femtosecond crystal oscillators. Okay, so in other words, we have a lot of fancy stuff in there to control clock, to control timing. It's got temperature controlled clock management on that, all of that. It also has a very upscale high-end USB implementation so that we have a good way to manage the incoming USB signal. So that's what all of those numbers and things basically mean, okay, in a stripped down sense. Okay, I will show you the outputs and all of that here in a moment, but let's talk about the kinds of files that it can handle. So all of the digital outputs save the Toslink optical, and I'll show you the outputs here in a moment. Can handle PCM files with sampling rates up to 384 kilohertz. Okay, the SPDIF and the AES outputs can handle 24-bit word length, and the I2S outputs can handle up to 32-bit word lengths there. Also, it can handle DSD up to DSD 512. I think that's going to have to come from the I2S output to get that high. The other outputs can handle digital over PCM, or DSD over PCM, I should say, excuse me. All right, there are ASIO drivers in existence out there. There are plug-and-play Windows 10, like Wasapi drivers and all of this. It is compatible with Windows version 7, 8, 10, and probably 11. Windows 11 has dropped since this was released. I haven't seen any complaints out there about it, but it's probably compatible. Usually they are. Mac OS 10.6 later, and then you can use it with Linux if you have a UAC2 compliant kernel. You can also connect this to Android devices more recent than version 4.2. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff in there about what this is compatible with, about the clocking and the USB controller and all of that kind of stuff, which is good info to have. Let's take a look at the unit itself here. The front panel is pretty Spartan. Basically, we just have indicator lights behind these three little logos behind this glass or plastic, whatever that material is, right here on the front panel. They are not buttons. They are just backlit signals to show you what's going on, or backlit indicators, I should say, to show you what's going on. There really are no buttons or controls on this, with the exception of one thing, which I will show you in a minute. So that's the front panel. Done. Okay, round back. Okay, let's work from your right to left here. We have the USB input here. So this is where you're going to connect either a computer or a streamer or something like this. We have 3 I2S outputs in 2 different connector flavors. 2 HDMI style connectors, 1 RJ45 style connector. Here is the Toslink SPDIF fiber optic digital output. Then we have 2 coaxial SPDIF outputs in 2 connector flavors. Again, we have an RCA and a BNC. And then we have a 3-pin XLR connector for the balanced version of SPDIF, which is the AES/EBU. Then we have another BNC connector right here. If you want to connect an external clock to this, you can, and it would connect right there. I did not do that, but it is an option for you if you want it. And then we have the DC power input, which will accept DC voltage between 7.5 and 9 volts. Okay, I want to come back to that DC power input there for just a moment, because the power supply in this thing is a little bit different than a lot of audio devices. It does not use a linear power supply. It does not use a toroidal power supply or anything like that. Inside here, there is a 7.5 farad supercapacitor, okay? 7.5 farad, not microfarad, farad capacitor, which is a fair amount of electrical charge that can be stored in that capacitor. So the way this thing powers itself is the power supply simply powers up and charges that supercapacitor, and then that supercapacitor powers all of the various functions of the DAC, okay? The clock, the USB controller, the outputs, and all of that, like, all comes from that supercapacitor, and then the power supply just keeps charging up that capacitor. So it has been said in many places around the interwebs that that means that you really do not need to worry about buying a fancy aftermarket power supply for this thing, a linear power supply or something like that, because all you're doing is charging the supercapacitor. I did try a linear power supply on this, and my ears did tell me that there was a difference. Okay, not a huge one. It's certainly not something that I think most people will need to go chasing the dragon on, but it was there, and even though it was tiny, it was robust, meaning that it held up from signal chain to signal chain. It was a similar distance across them, difference, I should say, across them all, and I will unpack all of that as we get into the sound section. The stock power supply, however, looks like this. It's just a fairly simple, like, midline, not wall wart, because you plug in a standard 3-pin power cord there, and then it has a kind of stiff kind of memory, like all that DC power cord on it, with a fairly standard DC plug on this end. This is rated at a 7.5 volt, 2.93 amp output with 22 watts maximum output. Now, I believe it's Kitsune's website says on here that if you want to fast charge the capacitor, the supercapacitor in here, so charge it up a little bit more quickly, you need a 3 amp output on your power supply. 2.93 amps comes pretty close, right? So I don't know if that's a huge deal there at all, but I will report on sonic differences I heard with an LPS when we get to the sound section. Okay. Other than that, though, like, I mean, the connectivity is pretty robust. You get the one USB input, which is fairly standard, but then you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 digital outputs in different flavors, and you can use them simultaneously. Like, you can connect all of them if you wish. They are all active together. All right, the I2S protocol, you get 3 I2S outputs, and at least for the HDMI style connectors, there is a bank of dip switches on the bottom of the unit so that you can customize the pin outs to be compatible with the I2S input on whatever DAC you're trying to use. Unfortunately, I2S is not a standardized protocol yet, so the inclusion of having the dip switches is nice. It's not really convenient because you have to lift the unit up, flip the switches and all of that to set it to the correct setting. For me as a reviewer, that means I have to be careful to not put things on top of this in case I have a new DAC in for review that has a different I2S protocol than the one that I had just been reviewing. Okay, but it is nice to have that feature for someone who's more like the audience out there that's going to be a set it and forget it type more often than not. Okay, it is a nice level of flexibility to have that. Otherwise, the unit is simple. It's got a brushed aluminum chassis on it, okay, just lightly textured. Anyway, not brushed. I mean, it's solid. It's well built. The front panel is plastic, but the body of it is metal. I think this back panel is also plastic, but it's got some good weight and heft to it. It's solidly built. Okay, the build quality on the unit is nothing to complain about. It's not flashy. Okay, it's not aesthetically grabbing. It's just a black box that has a simple job. Okay, but it is well made. So with all of that, we will start transitioning to sound here, and we'll talk a little bit about test gear. Now here's the tricky part about this, because this unit has been doing front-end source duties in my system for close to 2 months now. And so it has been one of the pieces of source gear for basically all of the headphone or DAC or amp reviews I have released since June, probably, of 2023 here. Okay, so that's a number of things out there. But for evaluation of just this, I'll share the signal chains I used to evaluate just this piece here, because they were primarily using this, either connecting it directly to my Windows 10 desktop PC, which is custom built, okay, and or connecting its USB input to my ultraRendu, my Sonore ultraRendu streamer. I've had both a hardware version 1.0 and a hardware version 1.3 of the ultraRendus in. I'm working on a review for those too. Okay, but use that here too. And then downstream from that, various outputs would have been connected to my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, or the Gustard R26 has been here for a bit as well, using various inputs on that, and then a little bit of the Gishelli J2S, which I am also working on a review for. Hope to have that done very soon. All right, and then those 3 DACs would have been connected to specific amps usually, like the Berkeley goes into my Vioelectric HPA V281, the R26 is going into my head amp GSX Mini, and the J2S is going into the Lake People G111 Mark II. Headphones for evaluation, serious evaluation lately would be the Susvara and the Utopia, the original Utopia. And then I have done some headphone reviews lately of the Meze 109 Pro, the Kennerton Yallerhorn GH40, and then 2 Auroras models, the Australis and the Borealis. Links for all of that down in the description. Those, like, this was a source for all of those reviews as well. Okay, the sound. Here's the thing. On its own, I don't feel like there is a ton to talk about on the sound. I do think that in large part, it basically just gets out of the way. I don't get the sense that it has much of its own sound signature, save possibly in one aspect. And when I say sound signature here, I should say from a perceived frequency response standpoint, because throughout most of the frequency range, I do not detect that it is warming the sound, brightening the sound, okay, bringing the mids forward and anything like it's just pretty neutral, mostly get out of the way kind of thing on that. Save for the deep sub bass. Okay, what stood out to me sonically when I transitioned from using the SU-2 here to the SU-6 was that there was suddenly more low sub-bass rumble. Like there was just more presence in the really, really deep bass. We're talking like below 60 hertz kind of bass. And then like not only in that low region, but then also up into the mid bass a little bit, there was more impact, there was more dynamics, there was also more control, more texturing, more detail in that bass as well. Like to me, that was like when I put this into my system and I listened to this for the first time, and like the first couple of sessions after that, I'm just like, whoa, there's a lot more bass presence here and a lot more physicality and impact to that bass. Okay. So that was the first thing that I noticed right away in just a slow switch, having used the SU-2 for a couple of years, honestly, and then switched to that. That was the biggest thing that I noticed. In time, I started to sense that there was just a little bit more resolution, a little bit more natural timbre, a little bit more accurate staging, like imaging and separation, tightened up a little bit, particularly in the depth dimension when using the SU-6 and all of that. So that's what I'm going to say, like, for the sound of this unit on its own. It's very clean. It's very quiet. It has a very low sonic background. I don't really know that I ever heard the sonic background, okay, and so forth. But for the most part, it just gets out of the way and says, here is your music, without really injecting a whole lot of flavor or color in it anyway, which is honestly what I want from a digital source. I will color the sound elsewhere when I want to, okay, the way I want to, but I think I want my digital source to be as clean and as faithful and as neutral as it can be. Except for that sub bass maybe, and I'm a bit torn here on whether that sub bass is actually added or whether it is the SU-2 and other DDCs that I've had just were actually removing some of it from the signal. Hard to say. There's just more presence here than I have heard, particularly from the SU-2, or that I can remember. It's been a while from the Iris, the Denafrips Iris. All right, so I think the rest of this review, we will get into like how do you change the sound a little bit, and then also we'll talk a little bit about, we'll do the comparison with the SU-2 on there, because I think that's going to be the more helpful stuff here. Let's talk about the power supply thing for a moment. So I tried a Small Green Computer power supply. Small Green Computer is the parent company of Sonore that makes the ultraRendu streamer. Okay, they make a pretty solid linear power supply. This is a little bit older unit. The new ones that are out there have removed this external voltage display here. Anyway, I got one of these and set it to just under 9 volts, like 8.7 volts, 8.7, 8.8 volts, something like that, and plugged it into this to compare to the stock power supply. And wouldn't you know, even though they say I'm not supposed to, okay, the word should, and by extension should not, are becoming, like, sometimes those are the worst words in the English language, because the gap between should and does is often large. In this case, it's not large, but it's detectable and it's robust. So let's unpack that a little bit. The SGC LPS, okay, at that 8.7, 8.8 volts, something like that, was warmer than the stock power supply. It also was more impactful in the bass. Okay, the SU-6 was always more impactful than the SU-2 in the bass. It just was slightly more so with the SGC power supply, okay, with that LPS than it was the stock power supply. And then again, like there was a little bit of extra warmth in the frequency response in comparison to the stock power supply, right? Just a little bit. I don't think it lost any clarity or resolution or holography in the sound in the spatial presentation, but I also think that the trade-off may have been that the stock power supply was just a little bit quieter, and it came across like a little bit lower sonic background. Okay, which surprised me a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. And then it also had a little bit more clarity to it. And I think that came from the fact that like the treble was just a hair smoother, and like it was just slightly brighter. And that caused the treble to just sound a little bit cleaner and a little bit more tonally balanced than the SGC power supply was doing. Now, is that actually because the SGC is subtracting from the treble, or is it because it added a little bit of warmth in? I'm not sure, but that's just the difference that my ears heard. And when I say it's robust, even though it's a tiny difference, like it's robust, and I'm using that in a more sciencey way to mean that it's persistent across different systems. Like I heard those differences just described between the power supplies on my, really high-end Berkeley Alpha Vio HPA V281 Susvara / Utopia system. Heard it on the Gustard R26 plus the GSX Mini into any other headphone. Heard that difference in the Gishelli J2S and the Lake People G111 Mark II as well. So like that, those slight differences were present on all three of those systems. So that's like it, using the term robust scientifically, is that it holds up when the situation changes, doing the same kind of thing across different situations. So is it my ears playing tricks on me, or is that a confirmation bias kind of thing? I went into expecting to not hear a difference between, like, once I learned that this was a supercharger super capacitor, there we go. Once I learned that was how it did the power supply, I did not expect to hear a sonic difference. And so when I did hear one, I was like, ugh, here we go again. I have to report this. It's robust. It's small. It's slight. It's robust. It's detectable. It's, again, robust. And people aren't going to like it, but I've got to report to you guys what I hear. So I think you can tweak the sound very slightly by switching up the power supply on this thing. You're going to get bigger differences doing other changes elsewhere in your system. Okay, so I would not put a ton of focus and energy into getting a different power supply for this unit up front. Save that for like one of the last things that you do in your system. Okay. Comparison with the SU-2 then, I've already done it a little bit here. When it comes to ergonomics and connectivity, the SU-6 wins just because it has, almost twice the number of outputs. 4 outputs on the SU-2 compared to 7 outputs on the SU-6. So there's that flexibility that the SU-6 offers. Okay, and then you can bring your own power supply if you want to the SU-6. The SU-2 has a built-in LPS in it right here. Sonic differences. I tested this in 2 different ways. I got identical Mogami wire BNC 75 ohm coax cables and connected the BNC outputs of each of these DACs into my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 because it has 2 BNC coax inputs on it. All right, and then I connected both of these to the same PCI card USB hub in my desktop computer via identical Pangea USB cables. And then I set Rune, took some doing because they're both Singxers. So getting drivers and all of that to work out. I ended up having to use the Wasapi drivers for both of these, but I did eventually get Rune to talk to both of these at the same time in that setup, so that I could quick switch using my Berkeley to switch back and forth between the two outputs and do a quick switch comparison, a quick A/B there. And then the other method that I used was I used my ultraRendu streamer, basically using the same connection type, the BNC coax that I just mentioned, but I would have to physically go pull the USB cord that came from the ultraRendu, went into the DDCs, out of one and stick it into the other, which definitely slowed down the switching process, but that's what I did methodologically. So no, that is not a blind test. I can't fully do that with, and still be able to switch these things on my own. So just going to have to take what you get on this one, okay? All right. There was definitely a difference, though. For one thing, that bass difference that I described a moment ago really came through. I was really surprised by how authoritative the Susvara was on my system with the SU-6 in line. Like, that one almost benefited the most, just because it really just rumbled a lot more, reached down deeper, and slammed harder with the SU-6 in the chain than the SU-2 did. So especially on the Susvara, that difference was very apparent. But the SU-6 soundstage is a little bit bigger than the SU-2's. That is not necessarily an improvement, because soundstage size is just very much a preference thing, and it's not necessarily a better or worse thing. But what is a better thing about the SU-6 over the SU-2 is that its imaging and its separation in all three dimensions is superior to the SU-2's. So it is a more three-dimensional and holographic sound field, okay, in its presentation than the SU-2 is capable of delivering. But then it's also more resolving and more textured. There's just more in the sound. There's more going on. There's more clarity as a result and that sort of thing. And it's just also not just in the bass, but also through the rest of the frequency range. It is more dynamic, more energetic, more lively. Not to an exaggerated or unnatural degree, just slightly more so than what the SU-2 is capable of doing. So put all of that together, and the SU-6 is really just the superior sounding product basically across the board. The SU-2 is a very good DDC for the money, I think. Like, I've had it for a while. It sounds really good. Like, it is no slouch. It's just that the SU-6, being the Big Brother model, is just that. It is the Big Brother model. It just is a wholesale upgrade across the board from the SU-2. And given that, just given the state of the market on DDCs and all that, of the ones I've heard, it does seem like the SU-6 very much earns its $750 price tag for all of those reasons. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up then. The SU-6 is excellent. It really improved the sound of my already very good sounding system, upped it all the more, sounds even better now. More resolving, more holographic, okay, more natural in its timbre, and definitely more impactful and substantial in the low sub bass, which I enjoy. It also gives me the output flexibility that I was looking for, at least for now. We'll see how this reviewing gig keeps growing, and if I need more digital outputs, I don't know. It's getting to be more than I can handle on the output front as it is. But anyway, it's a really easy product to recommend. If you have a high-end DAC and want to get the most out of it, and the USB implementation on it is not so great, then I would really strongly consider looking at the SU-6. So I will leave it there. I'm Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Singxer SU-6 DDC. Please like this video if you have not. Subscribe to the channel if you have not. Leave a comment down below. Check out my PayPal and my Patreon to help me keep this channel running, as well as consider using those affiliate links if you are going to buy either the SU-6 or the SU-2. So thanks again for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.